today first. So if you click into assets on the left side of the screen, your field list will pop up. So it's giving you a summary of basically everything that you have entered already for the field. Depending on how much you have filled out already, this might be completely filled in, or there might be some spots missing. So the goal is to have as much as we can fill in this to help the crop models run better, but also to have it for your own information as well. If fields aren't showing up, or maybe this information is not looking correct, I would first suggest to go look in the upper right-hand corner under season, just to make sure that your season is right before we jump into it as well. And also assets, this will show if you have multiple farms under your account, which make sure the right farm is selected as well. Now, in order to be able to run a crop model, 5 minimum sets of data are needed to be input first. So the first of which is current crop. Second is hybrid or variety. Third is your seeding date. Fourth is your seeding depth, and fifth is your row spacing. So those are the 5 minimum data that we need. However, it would also be great to have input in there your previous crop as well as seeding rate. So if you have this information entered already, that is awesome. But if not, it is pretty easy to change. On the left-hand side, you can just click next to the fields that you want to edit, or you can sort by field or sort by crop type. So say you want to just use, you need to enter in your soybean information, just type in soybean and it can filter it out too. But since all this information is already filled in for me, I just want to show how to edit that. So on the left-hand side, if you want to edit this first field, to do that, you just highlight it, click on the pencil in the upper right-hand corner that says edit, and then it brings up the page that allows you to type in this information. So as I mentioned, we need 5 things to make sure we get Asset Manager filled out correctly. First of which is current crop, which you have a soybean here. Second is your current hybrid or your variety. Third, your seeding date. Fourth, your seeding depth. And fifth, your row spacing. So one thing I do want to point out with all of this is your current hybrid. So we need to make sure that this is actually typed in correctly too. And an example of this is how you see it on your seed tag or usually your seed guide. So an example is Asgrow 007 soybeans. You might type it in as Asgrow 007, but then when we run the model, it won't register. So all we have to do is go look on the seed guide, and Asgrow is actually simplified down to AG007. So when you type in your hybrid here, it should start popping up, and that's how you can filter in your assets. So just an important note to make as you're typing that part in. I'm going to cancel that. But after you have all this information in, then we are good to go. You have everything in the background that's needed to run the model. So just remember those 5 minimum things. So now before we jump into the actual crop model part, does anybody have any quick questions?
We do have one question from Karma, and Karma wants to know, on the field info, you show row spacing in inches. Karma's defaults to centimeters. Is there any way that they could change that?
Yep, perfect. Good question. I forgot to mention that. Yes, you can change that within here by clicking these 3 little dots on the right-hand side, and that'll bring up your different units. So you can change the units like that. And so that's good to know. Thank you for catching that.
Perfect.
We can also change that in our settings too, but a simple way to do that is right here is just clicking on those 3 dots.
Okay, we don't have any other questions right now, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sounds good. So after we get this information in, we can run our crop model. So I showed right away, if you click on the crop manager icon on the left-hand side of the screen, it will appear a whole array of crops. So we have 14 different crops that we have crop models for. And we also have one in the making right now with sugarcane. So just to give you a brief background on what these crops are, how do we get these, there are 2 different types of models that we have. There's what we call as deterministic models and heuristic models. Deterministic models are more complex models that take into account more information to give you an output of growth. So 2 of the crops that are used in our deterministic models are corn and soybeans, where the remainder of the crops are what we call as heuristic models. They are more basic models, but still take into account your basically growing degree days, or your corn heat units, or your photothermal units, as well as your seeding date and your crop to give you an output of growth stages. Doesn't really matter if it's a deterministic or heuristic model, we still get the same outcome either way. But just to give you a little brief background on where those come into play. But how to generate one, once we come into this page, Yet again, we probably should first check in the upper right-hand corner that we're in the right season, so we're in 2018, and that you're underneath your right farm name. So after you check that, we can go into whatever crop we want to run. So obviously, if we don't have cotton labeled as a crop in our asset manager, we can't go into cotton. But however, we do have wheat. So I'm going to go into a couple different crops, but first one I'm going to go into is wheat. So if you click on the crop and you pull it up, the summary page will first appear. So if this is your first time going into a crop model or going into the crop manager, this whole list might appear absent because in order for it to fill in, we have to run the crop model the first time. So don't be alarmed if all this information is not here the first time. Once you click into it and run it, it will start filling in, because this is just a summary page of what each crop model is. Also, if a field is not showing up or there's some missing information, that may be because we don't have all of our asset manager filled in, or those 5 key data sets that are needed. So that might be a first place to look as well. But just to give you a run through on the summary page, as we come in, on the left-hand side will be all your fields for that crop, when it was last updated. So you can see these were all last updated yesterday. It'll show you your seeding date, but then it'll also show you what current stages it is at. So you can go in there and actually run the crop model to see what stage it's at, or I give you a summary briefly right here showing you what current stage it is at, what is the next stage that it's going to, and also how many days until the next critical growth stage. So we have different critical growth stages for each crop, depending on what that crop may be. But as you can see here, since we're already in late flowering, that we're already 11 days past days to flowering. So depending on the crop, it might show that there's 8 days to seed fill or this and that. So those are just showing how many days until your next critical growth stage. Then if we scroll over a little bit, on the very right-hand side will be disease or pest. So we do have some disease and pest models also input with these different crop models. There are different diseases and pests for each crop, obviously, but there are more to coming. So there's some missing that you want to see. There will be some more coming down too. And each crop also will have a different number. So some crops we have more developed for right now than others, but that's what you're seeing on this right-hand side. And so for fusarium head blight risk, it is shown that as low for most crops right now, but is medium in one field. So low just means that there's low risk for it. Where midge percentage is showing 50, that's showing how much percentage of midge would be emerged right now. So that just kind of gives you a rundown on what those numbers mean and what that symbol looks like. But now if we actually want to get into a model and we want to run it, all we have to do is click on the field name, and it will run the crop model for us. And that's all we had to do for that. So just to give you a rundown on this page, and this may look different depending on what crop you have too, but it'll show you different growth stages where it's at. So right now it's highlighted blue to where it's currently at, and it'll also show you the date. And so we are at, according to this, on June 28th as of now, at early flowering for this field. But it'll also show you, if you look ahead and want to see when's it predicting to be at early seed fill, it'll show you on July 9th. So it'll not only show you what day we think it's currently at, but what we're predicting it to be at as well. On the bottom of the screen here, if we want to zoom in or zoom out for specific dates, magnifying a little bit, we can slide the slider bar on the bottom so it can zoom out in and zoom out specific dates. And then also on the top left-hand side here is right now check for growth stages, midge, and fusarium head blight. Well, if we want to make one disappear, we don't want to see them all, we can just simply click out of it or click back into it, and that slider bar on the bottom will disappear. This is where those disease that we're talking about on the outside. So right now it's showing that green is low risk, and then yellow is at medium risk, where red and orange are at high to very high risk. So fusarium head blight, we don't have very high risk right now. But what we take into account with the disease models is that disease triangle. So we're always assuming that the pathogen is present because we don't know if it can be there or not. So we're always assuming that the pathogen is there. However, we're also taking into account not only what crop you have, what the susceptibility of it, but also what conditions are favorable for that disease or pest and how long are they persisting. So that's how we generate if there is a risk for that pest or not. So assuming that for fusarium head blight, assuming that the pathogen is always there, we are saying that because the conditions and at the stage of the crop is vulnerable for and is at medium risk for fusarium head blight over these dates. So that's just a brief rundown on what those disease and pest models look like when you're looking at it. So let's go look at a different crop. Since we saw wheat, let's just run it through soybean just to see what a different crop would look like. So yet again, when you click into it, it should show your field name on the left. The only difference here is that the stages obviously are different because we use a different staging for soybean. So it's showing here though that your days to R1, so days to our first bloom, is 12 days away, 8 days away for some fields. So since that hasn't occurred, it's saying we're predicting that in 12 days it'll be at R1. And then you can also see the different diseases or pests for that crop too here on the right side. So for soybean right now, we have aphid, Japanese beetle risk, and Asian rust risk. Now, if you see it limited here, that just means that because of the crop stage is at, or the time and point of what we have, then it is limited and saying that's not really a risk right now. But to run the crop model, all you have to do is click into it like we did the same way for wheat. And for soybean, it actually shows the plant on and it highlights to where it is at right now. So on June 28th, it's highlighted to be at V5. And then if you look on the bottom here, it also shows on what date it will be for upcoming stages that we're predicting as well. This one doesn't necessarily have the disease and pest models on the bottom there, just showing it in the summary page. So the last thing I want to go over is what can we use now that we can run our crop model, we have all our information put into Asset Manager. What do we use these crop models for? And for growth stages, it's really important for our application timings or our logistics management. So say you have a couple different fields that are spread over planting date but spread over long distances, and you want to see when one is going to start flowering compared to another one, compared to when you want to get your herbicide down and your fungicide down. Well, we can look at your crop management model to help with this logistics management and determining when these application timings are going to be. And it also helps with growth stages for your disease or pest models. So when you're looking to see there's going to be a high risk in certain fields, that maybe helps you be more aware of when that growth stage is going to be there, and if there's going to be a high risk for that field based on those weather conditions. It also might help us when you're trying to apply maybe a growth regulator that is very stage specific, or a crop protection product that is very stage specific. Fertilizer application timing, you want to get it in as well as specific growth stage. So those are some of the brief things that we can use crop managers for, and what you can use it for to be able to determine where your crop is at and where these pests and diseases are. One thing I do want to mention with the pest and disease models that I didn't mention is that even though it's showing high risk, since we are always assuming that the pathogen is there, it is important to go out and scout those fields just to confirm or to not confirm or to unconfirm what is happening in the field. So with that, that's the basics of running a crop model, how they're generated. I'm just going to briefly go over what we did. First, you have to make sure that you have to have your asset manager filled out first. Otherwise, you won't be able to run the crop manager model. The 5 minimum things that you need in your asset manager are your crop type, your hybrid or your variety, your seeding date, your seeding depth, and row spacing. But it would be great to have your previous crop and your seeding rate in there as well. You can change those units by clicking on those 3 dots within your asset manager. Once that's all filled out, you can go into this crop manager page, click into the crop of choice that you want to run, and then click onto that field and it'll automatically run your crop model for you. The first time that you run it, it may not, or first time you go into the manager, the summary page might not be filled in, but after you run the model for the first time, it'll start filling in daily after that. So with that, I just wanted to ask if there are any questions.
I don't see any questions right now. If anybody's typing in a question, maybe just raise your hand so we wait for your question to pop up. No, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions, Nick. So with that, I thank you very much. Do you have any final thoughts or words, anything you want to share?
Nope, we went through this pretty quickly, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any way.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, everyone, and thanks again, Nick. And once again, we will be holding another webinar next Thursday at the same time, so we look forward to having you back with us. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.